Yo, what's up? What's up? So today I'll be talking about why I think that everybody should read Classroom of the Elite. So I'll be talking about the light novel in particular, not the manga. So I think that most of you may know Classroom of the Elite, the anime, and it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's a solid anime. But the light novel is a lot better, and I have the feeling that most people do not even know that. And there's a lot of hate for the anime because, like, it has its problems, let's say it like that. And in this video, I'll be talking about why I think that everybody should give the light novel a try at least once. But I will not only go into like the good parts about the light novel, also I will also portray some of the bad characteristics or problematics that you could have with it. So let's start with what I think is amazing about Classroom of the Elite, the light novel. So I will be not talking about it in the perspective that you have already watched the anime. I will just talk about it in general. So bear that in mind. So anyway, what is Classroom of the Elite all about? So basically, just from the premise, we are met with a high school, so to say, government facilitated high school, you could call it like that. And what happens here is that we have four classes, A, B, C, and D, and they have class points. And basically, if you are really good at school and achieve good in exams and special exams, your class points get incremented, but they can also be decremented if you, I don't know, perform badly or, I don't know, lose some kind of special exam, so to say. And if you have more points than the class above you, you will become the other class. Now, okay, so maybe this sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. So basically, if you're class D, per default, as the letters imply, Class C is above you, but if you have more points than them, if you earn more points than them, you'll be the new Class C, so that's how it kind of works. And the idea is that the class, which is Class A at the end of like the 3 years, which high school takes place in Japan apparently, will be awarded, so every student is awarded in this class the right to get any job and go to any university he wants. I think in Japan solely because it wouldn't really make sense if this would include other countries. But yeah, so all the people strive to be class A. So from the promise, it kind of sounds like every other high school anime with a lot of stupid stuff, but it really isn't. So I'm up to date in the light novel, and I can say that it's really not obvious which class is going to win. I have no idea still which is going to win, and actually it is portrayed in a way that every class has likable characters and a really interesting cast, so there is not really a class which I want to win or I want to lose because every class has amazing characters. But back to the topic, so basically this is the premise. But if you go to like the background of all of this, this would be like my first really selling point for Classroom of the Elite. So the politics behind all of that are really interesting, and as you read more and more, it will actually make sense. So at first I also thought, okay, this is kind of like a really unrealistic concept for such uh, a story, but it becomes really clear what the aim of that is, and also what the aim is of all the other students which are in the other classes. Um, because this is just an introductory video kind of, so I will just talk about why you should read it. I will not really go too much into spoilers, but like the most basic information which I can give, which is not a spoiler, is kind of that they opt to like increase the capacities of every student. So every student is meant to become really capable in like leading roles in politics and in the economy. And if you read it on, it actually makes sense how the school does that. So yeah, so the whole background and the whole political idea is really interesting. There are novels at like the already at a later stage where things will be more explained in detail, and I think this is where you can really see how much detail is in that story. So yeah, this is one selling point. Another one, which is I think frankly the biggest and the best, is the characters. So starting off with the main character, who is at first kind of like an introverted guy who doesn't say a lot, and you think, okay, he kind of is just a guy, maybe a little smarter than what he seems to be or what he tries to sell out, but he isn't anything special. But yes, he is special. Now, Ayano Koji is actually my favorite character or my favorite protagonist in any kind of media, and I've read like a lot of manga and I've watched a lot of anime, and I can safely say that not because I'm some kind of weird kid that just likes him because, I don't know, he's like edgy or something like that. It's because I think that he is really well written. He is a really interesting character, he has a really interesting personality. So the interesting part is that even though it's written from his perspective, and you should know every of his thoughts because it's kind of like it's a conversation based story, so he kind of just has thoughts on every conversation, so you know all of his thoughts. This is what you might think, but like his greater plans are still a mystery, which is really interesting because as you read on, you notice that he lies not only to other characters but also to himself. Some of the thoughts that you read are not really correct, and this is really interesting, and I don't really know another story that does that. So on the surface level, it is really plain what he says and really plain what he thinks, but this is just like him lying to the reader or also to himself, because as you learn more and more about him, I will not really go into detail here because this is a spoiler, you will notice that he has a lot of contradictions in his character, but not because of bad writing. This is like intentionally so. So he has a lot of interesting contradictions which he has to himself kind of overcome as a human being and to grow. And this is, I think, a good word for describing all the characters. We can see, because like we follow a lot of characters through a lot of time, 3 years, you can see them grow really much. And this, at this age, people grow the most, I would assume, like 16, 17, 18. And because of the way the facility works, the school, the growth is even more increased in this short period of time because of this constant battle between the classes. Characters have to grow even more emotionally, physically, and in every kind of form, and you can clearly see that there are some really good examples of that. And I think that the character's growth is one of the best things about Classroom of the Elite, because all the characters change, or mostly, but all of the main characters have some kind of growth, which is really interesting, especially the class leaders, Horikita, Rien, Sakayanagi, and Ichinose. They all have their character arcs and they all change really interestingly. And in all of these changes, Ayano Koji plays a part, just subtly just manipulating them into becoming something that he wants. I'm not going to really talk more about that, as I already said. This is kind of like a spoiler. But yeah, Ayano Koji really is an interesting protagonist, as he kind of tries to manipulate everyone around him, but manipulates himself. Anyway, enough about that, because if I talk more about that, I might actually spoil y'all for some information that will be in the future, so no. Anyway, the characters are all written beautifully, and there are some really big character changes, and I think this is the other selling point for this whole story, because I think that the characterization is going above and beyond. So basically, I think that sometimes when I read, I actually had the feeling that I know some of these characters personally. And it is really interesting how characters also become more real as Ayano Koji has more interactions with them, because that kind of makes sense. We see the world from his perspective mostly, and it makes sense that we see other characters more as he sees them more. Kind of obvious. But in the beginning of each book, there is a soliloquy for each character, so yeah, you can also see sometimes the thoughts of other characters, which is really interesting, as I already said. Anyway, the other two things I wanted to talk about are the special exams. These are basically exams where the classes compete mostly against each other, really, and they try to come out on top. There are some ridiculous rules here, and it's sometimes really hard to grasp all of them, but it still is really, really interesting, because all of these special exams, or most of them, actually present you kind of with a board, you can say a chess board, where all of the characters participating in them can have like some brilliant moments and deciding on strategies. And what I think is genius about that is that most of the exams actually create or facilitate a ground on which characters can overcome other characters and can outsmart other ones. So all of these exams create a setting maybe similar to other animes, as you know, Death Note or something, where a lot of smart things can happen. Let's call it like that. So yeah, so this is also one of the things I think is really, really good about Classroom of the Elite, just this basic premise of these special exams. So it can have some of the most ridiculous kind of rules, but it is really interesting to see how it all unfolds, because most of the time you only know by the end, because Ayano Koji doesn't tell you what happens in his inner thoughts, as I already briefly talked about earlier. And I think that most of the exams, it's also a challenge for the reader to kind of find out who comes out on top and who will use which strategy, or which character will betray what kind of class or something. So yeah, that's actually really, really interesting, and yeah, not really much more to say here, but the special exams really are well done. Let's call it like that. In general, some of the plans these characters have are extremely complex and really hard to grasp, so there's like a lot of other characters involved. So the one character uses this character to do that and that and that and that and that and that, and this just goes on for like a long time, and you can it's really easy to kind of lose all of these strings, because it's kind of like a spider web, so to say. Each character's plan, so let's say like the more important characters all have their spider webs of plans, which are extremely complex, and in all of those kind of parts of the spider web are other characters and their actions. So their actions are also part of another scheme, and these schemes are also clashing, especially in the special exams. So yeah, just really perfect. Another great thing is, which is I think the last thing I want to talk about, is just the setting. No, it's not really too special, it's just a school, and there's like the Keyaki Mall, so where students can buy stuff, groceries and other items and, I don't know, clothing. But I really think that these places feel real because how often the author mentions them and describes them, and it is really interesting how they are described, because I've never really had this feeling before that I actually am currently at this place. So at some point after like reading on and on, I had the feeling that I know this Keyaki Mall in real life, so that was actually crazy. There are only a few other books I think where they achieve a similar effect to this degree, so yeah. One thing I wanted to address though is that the language used in this book is not really too complicated, which is, I think a lot of people actually criticize that, to be honest, but I kind of don't really see that. I mean, yes, for example, the English translation of Monogatari, there's like a lot more complicated English and a lot more metaphors, but Classroom of the Elite just has plain English. It's not really hard to understand. It's more, you could say, kind of like a newspaper or something like that. But it's not what is written in the lines, but it's more about what is written behind the lines. So there's like a lot of thoughts and a lot of interesting um, ideas behind that. So just, yeah. But the plain text is not really that complicated. But for me personally, I think I like this form more than most of the other reading forms because it's easy to read, and it's not really annoying that you have to reread sentence after sentence after sentence because like you don't understand what's going on here. But yeah, you understand everything that's going on, but still you can just think about this stuff that could be the reason for that or the reason for that. So yeah. Now, let's address some of the problems which I think some people might have with the light novel. So, first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. There are a lot of books. There really are a fucking lot of books. I mean, I think there are around 25 English translated books, paperback, and even more so if you read it digitally, because like Japan has a lot more volumes released than the English version, and it really is a lot. And each book can have like from 350 to 400 pages. And these paperback versions actually do not include like the extra stories, which I only found online. And they are not really long, but each book has some of them, or each volume, so to say. So yeah, it's a lot of reading. Really a lot of reading. I've never read this much before, like when you talk about one story. But for me, it was kind of like I was just sucked in and I couldn't stop just reading. And there was sometimes times when I just read 8 hours straight with no pause, just because I wanted to know what's going on. So I think that you will have a really pleasant experience. So it's similar to like watching One Piece, because a lot of people have the problem that One Piece is just too long. But when you actually watch it, you will notice how it is actually a great thing that this is so long, because you actually feel like you're part of the adventure. And here it's the same thing. You kind of feel that you are a part of the school, you are a part of the character's growth, and so on and so on. And you can feel more emotional towards characters in that way. So I don't have a problem with the length of the story, but when you start reading it, you may actually kind of, I don't know, might have issues with the length. So if you are this kind of person, and I think most people are, not the biggest bookworms, so I would suggest you watch the anime first and then read where the anime left off. And if you like it, you can also reread the part which the anime covered, because I already said that the anime actually left a lot of stuff out, but you can get the basic idea from the anime and then just read the light novel. And if you like it, then you can just keep reading it. For example, I would still suggest that you stop after season 2, not after season 3, because I think season 3 covers all of the first year, and I don't know, they just left so much out from the light novel, it's actually crazy. But you can also just wait until season 3 is finished, watch all of the episodes, and then start with year 2. And as I already said, if you like it, you can just reread all of year 1. Yeah, so otherwise I don't really think there are any kind of problems. The one thing that I found not really explained enough, but I think it will maybe be more explained in the future, is kind of how the characters are appointed to which class at the beginning. So, because you have to imagine that at first every class has the same amount of class points, and it doesn't really make sense that there is a class A, B, C, and D, right? Because I already said that the letter denotes number of points you have in comparison to the other classes. But it was kind of made that the best students are assigned to class A at the beginning, and they naturally took first place with like their points just after the first month. But the thing is that I don't really understand some of the characters' appointments and why they are appointed to this and this class, but I think maybe this will be explained later on. And another thing is, if you actually expect like a lot of action and you are like more of the, I don't know, shonen kind of guy, then this might not be something for you. I mean, it's a book, so I don't know if you really want to read a fight with no pictures, but it really has not that much action. So it's more dialogue based, so you should like this kind of form. But yeah, as I already said, for those people who are not really sure if this description suits them well and if they think, okay, this could be something for me, watch the anime, but keep in mind that there are a lot of details missing and the light novel is a lot better. But if you like the basic premise, then you might consider reading on. And for all of those who actually really enjoy reading and think, okay, no, I will just start with like the first volume and work my way through, and I want to have like the full journey and the full adventure, then go on, read it. I can only suggest it to anybody and recommend it to anybody, as this is actually my favorite story of all time, or my favorite fictional story, even above some of the other really great ones like Monogatari, or I don't know, some of my favorite manga kind of stories like Berserk or Vagabond. I just really like Classroom of the Elite. So that's that. I hope all of you had a pleasant time with me talking about this topic. If you did, then you might consider dropping a like and subscribing. And yeah, so I will see you in the next.